I got time. Got nothing to do.
Awesome. What's going on, everybody? It is a new episode of the Feed To Embiid. It is Tuesday, December 20th. It's been about a month since we did a last episode. Wanted to bring on the best of the best that I have to give you in this market. Rich Hofmann of The Athletic, your work is fantastic. How are you doing tonight?
Austin, I'm doing fine. Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm not sure it actually is true, but
Oh, it's true.
Okay.
Rich, this team we cover is there's something. They are up by 9 with 30 seconds left against the Lakers. Needed overtime to win. Next night, Embiid scores maybe the easiest 53 points you've ever seen in your life against the Hornets. Then they blow the doors off a decent Sacramento team. Then they let Golden State hang around just long enough to keep you interested. And then, of course, last night, Monday night, they piss away a very winnable game against Toronto that they ultimately ended up winning. Didn't have to be as difficult as it was. They've won 5 in a row. They are plus 64 in those 5 games, so that's an average margin of about 13. I don't know. I feel like you can easily identify ways that they could play better.
Yeah, no, this is not a parade time, I would say. Look, at the beginning of this season, though, it was bad and they were losing too. Yeah. So, I think we've kind of talked about it. I'm sure I've talked about it with you at games and stuff too. Just, I don't know, the general apathy around this team and kind of, do people believe in them? And like, sometimes I feel like we get a lot of questions like, oh, like this team has no chance to win a championship. They're not even questions really. It's just people telling us that or whatever. And it's like, look, you're probably right. Like if you're going to go with that, but that's also, 4 months from now until that actually starts getting decided. And right now it's like the teams they're playing are not very good. Like, I think that's fair to say. This has been a home stand where you got to fatten up against these teams, right? You gotta get these wins. That said, that happens to everybody all over the league. They're also not playing with Tyrese Maxey during these games. Yeah. They're also playing with that Golden State game honestly felt like the first time all year where it was like, oh, the other team has a bunch of guys out, where the Sixers weren't actually that team for the first time. So I guess that's like a long-winded way of saying, like, I completely agree with you. Like, I'm not like, wow, this is a juggernaut by all means. But I think they're probably a little bit better than the market thinks. Like, I think the ability to take care of business is underrated. And I feel like, if they can continue to get these wins, like maybe that Clippers game will be hard, but they'll probably go 6-1 at least on this homestand, and then have some pretty easy games after that as well. They got a lot of work to do still, but it is better to have a lot of work to do, which I'm sure we'll talk about in more detail after this, while you're winning. And that's, I guess, how I would put it.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain things like you watch in the games and you're like this is okay for now. This is all kosher now. It works because they're playing, the dog shit of the league, like the Hornets. And then like they play the same way against a good team, they're going to get their doors blown off. Last night, I mean, there is some shot making luck in there, right? They couldn't make an open three to save their lives. D'Anthony shot 2 of 11 from 3. If he makes 3 of those shots, they win the game. They probably put the game away by halftime. They probably demoralized Toronto, take them out of the game.
He picked the right night to be off.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And I guess we've seen this team over the years. They get off to these rampage starts. They're 20-7 in 2019-20. Granted, that was the year Ben got hurt. The 2 years, the year before that, they were above water before they got Jimmy, and then they kind of took off. They've had very good starts to seasons, but they've peaked too early. So I feel like while the fan base can be up in arms that this isn't the bag of goods that was promised at the start of the season,
and it was promised.
Yeah, you're also not trying to win championships in December. You're trying to peak somewhere in the 2022 calendar year.
Yeah, and I think like last night's game against Toronto, perfect example. They didn't play that well. I think, you know what? I thought they played really well in the first half. I thought their ball movement, and they just couldn't make a shot. Like Melton, I understand, like, people just look at the 3-point line. It's like, oh, the variance. I thought the Sixers shots in the first half were awesome. Like, I thought they really could have shot like 60% in that half. They were kind of just completely picking apart the Raptors. And then it was kind of like that game in March against the Raptors last year, where I think that was the first quarter they played well. And then after that, like, Toronto just completely shuts them down, and it's ugly. and it turns into ISO ball, and they're not picking them apart at all, and Harden's holding it, and Embiid's holding it, and all of those things. So that's like the perfect example. And then I would say even like you get to overtime. I mean, their execution was terrible. Like it wasn't good. Harden, I don't know. Harden kept. I'm sure you obviously noticed this as well. They kept like running pick and roll where Anunoby was guarding Embiid to start, and they were getting the switch, which I think it's like, okay, you want Harden had Barnes on him. It's like, okay, well then you throw it back to Embiid, like with Barnes on him. Then Harden's like, I think he did it twice. He was like, all right, I'm going to ISO against Anunoby, which is like the worst matchup in the league. What is going on?
Yeah, he's like the favorite for DPOI, and they're like, oh, let's just run with this. Like,
why not?
And you know, like, I've lately when I write my game stories, I keep coming back to, I can't watch the ISO ball so much. I can't watch the elbow 5 with Joel, the elbow flat with Joel. So when they do get back to pick and roll, which they've done a lot more in the last few games, it feels like, I'm like, okay, well this is fine. This is like, you know, a very simple play that they had a lot of success with last season, except when they get into these ruts where they don't move the ball at all, their baseline of what their default for what they go to is just, okay, you three stand around the arc, and James and I are just going to spam pick and roll until someone figures it out. It's very easy to figure out. It's very easy to we're just going to switch this, or maybe we're just going to, you know, hedge or whatever. And then, you know, they get it to Joe, and then everyone's converging on him. I feel like there needs to be a lot more of screen actions that are easy to implement with this team. Like, how about a back screen? How about a flare screen? How about you run some split actions? Something that's a little bit more intricate than, oh, I'm just going to screen the ball and then I'm going to pop to the elbow or pop out or dive to the rim.
It would be cool to see Harden run some split action, right? Like if he's not going to get all the way to the rim, right? Like if you're going to just like kind of run into a wall down there, why don't you turn around and post up, and then you're a great passer, and you know maybe have Embiid screen for like I don't even know who the shooter would be. Maybe Tobias at this point, the way he's like running off screens at this point. Probably could do it with Melton a little bit too, and Shake even. I definitely think there's like a lack of diversity. Okay, that said, I agree with you. Like, I think that Houston game a couple weeks ago, and I will say, in fairness to Harden, like, probably shouldn't have been playing in that game. Like, clearly was rusty after that super long layoff because of the injury. But that was like a nightmare. That was like they just kept running ISO, and you saw it a little bit in the overtime of last night's game. Like Joel ran a couple of bad ISOs, so I struggle with it a little bit because, like, it's like you said, I do like when they run pick and roll, but what happens when teams switch? Because that's what teams are going to do. And then all of the good Harden pick and roll stuff kind of goes away unless there's like a super favorable mismatch like on Embiid. Maybe there will be sometimes, and Harden will have some pep in his step some days. But I did look up over the past couple of days because I was curious about this. Their ISO numbers and synergy as a team, they're pretty awesome, man. They ISO, and look, it's only 15% of their offense, or like 14%. They ISO the third most in the league, and they're the most efficient by a mile at it. Like, really? It's like 1.1 points per 100 when they shoot or pass out of it. So I don't really know what to do with it. Because, like, look, if you ask me, because I haven't dug deep into it, I have not watched all of those freaking possessions. Maybe 1 point. Maybe that's a good story for me or you or somebody else to write at some point. To me, I bet you that's in large part due to the Joel going crazy games. But I think, like you said, I mean, you gave Charlotte a little crap there. The dregs of the league. By the way, real quick on Charlotte, have you seen Mason Plumlee shooting these shots? Like, not just
I love
free throws. He's shooting shots left-handed.
It's great. I love it. It's fantastic. It's one of my favorite. Like, are we sure this is real? And it's like this thing where the ball doesn't go above his left shoulder.
No,
it's a legitimate shot put that he does, and God damn it, it works. Like, he's made progress as a free throw shooter, and and you think back to Ben, like when people were like thinking, like, is Ben lefty or righty? And I'm like, when you do it that way, it doesn't look like it's that hard of an adjustment to make. You just need to put in a couple summers of repetition. But he's starting to shoot like elbow level jump shots that are unguarded with some confidence as a lefty, which is wild to watch.
It's honestly that, and the Cornet jumping like from 10 feet away thing. Those are my two favorite. Maybe it's just because they're goofy white guys that are doing it, both of them, two tall white guys that are adding to the humor of it. But like, he made a fadeaway shot the other night, and I think it's that worldwide wob guy. Like, he like zooms in on the other team's bench if he shoots it in front of him, and like the disgust that these guys have watching that ball go in because of how ugly it is like one of my favorite things. Okay, sorry, I got off track there, but
no, I love it. I
was just laughing really hard about that the other day. I thought it was very funny. The ISO, if I had to guess, those ISO numbers are probably buoyed by Embiid against Charlotte, Embiid against Utah, where like I think it's fair to point out, like, against the best defenses, is that actually gonna work? Like, I mean, Toronto is a team that I struggle with, like, defensively. I feel like the Sixers kind of proved last year. I don't know, like, if you actually like understand what they're trying to do and come in with a mindset that you're going to ping the ball around and all those things, like, there were like 3 of those games where they scored a billion points in those games, and it's not by isolating either, too, for the most part. I agree. I think when it looks bad, you're just like, there's got to be another club in your bag. It does, though, seem right now, though, because like Doc says it at these press conferences all the time, like, we have an action and a shot that Joel wants to shoot at the end of the game. So it's clear, like, that elbow thing is like something they're going to lean on a lot. But I'm with you. Like, and by the way, I think Joe is a great passer out of that. Like, when it's a team that, it's especially like those bad teams, when it's a team that like is too small for him and they have to shrink the floor, they have to shade in. I mean, his highest assist percentage of his career, and it's like not a mistake. Like, he is baiting these double teams. But I guess, like, this is like a very long-winded way of saying, like, I get why they're doing it, but I'm also with you because I just don't think it's good enough against the best of the best. I just don't.
Yeah. I mean, well, I just think, like, I wonder how much those ISO numbers factor in, like, the fact that they run elbow 5 at like an obscene volume. And then it works for them because of how good of a mid-range shooter he is. If this was 3 or 4 years ago, before Doc came and before he started to take it seriously, wouldn't be as good as it is because his mid-range jumper was like a 42% shot. Now it's like, I think last that I want to say it was like 46 when he had his like MVP first candidacy year. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's going to wear him down because they're going to double eventually so hard. And when he gets tired, he makes a lot of mistakes, particularly with putting the ball on the floor, passing to people that aren't there. And by the way, while we're on the topic of passing and ball handling, James has gotten better at this over the last couple games, probably because his conditioning has gotten better. The decision making that Harden has made in recent weeks has been a little mind boggling. The Houston game, the shot that he takes to win the game, in regulation,
crazy.
Like, that was an ego shot where, this used to be my team, and I'm going to make sure that they remember that.
That's what that was. Yep.
And then, a couple passes there. There was the Lakers game where he's taking on pressure and he throws this ridiculous cross court pass that gets intercepted for a turnover in that insane fourth quarter. Yeah.
Two of them. Then he got stripped on the other one too. He was actively throwing that game at the end of that game.
No, it was horrendous to watch. But I gotta think that I probably trust their decision making in crunch time a little better than these games have shown. But there just isn't enough diversity to what they're doing. And the annoying part is I know they have it in their playbook because they are obsessed with Chicago action. They love running Chicago's with PJ down screening for DeAnthony or James, and then Joel coming up with the DHO, and he goes right down the middle of the floor. They love that action. They run it all game long. So I know they have very basic actions in their book that they can run, and yet I'm sitting here, I'm like, do something other than a pick and roll or something that actually gets somebody to be involved in the offense instead of just standing and staring. And I get it. Like, you have a heliocentric point guard in James Harden who, is ball dominant, who sets everybody up. He also needs people to move to get themselves open so he can find them for passes. And I get it. He probably wants, they probably want the floor spread. It doesn't mean you can't cut around the baselines and you can't, hey, set a back screen for me so I can, maybe we can force them to just think a little bit and can make defenses do a little bit of work. And I feel like they haven't done enough of that off the ball lately. And that's kind of why they fall into this malaise of, I'm just going to stand around and watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think just as a basketball fan or somebody who's ever just played the game, I think even if Joe is making those elbow jumpers, which a lot of times he is because he's just awesome. But think about like you said, the other three guys are standing around. That's not hard to guard. Okay, maybe he'll make it, but think about the other three players. Probably the other team's best offensive players are on that. Think about a team like Golden State. I'm not saying they're perfect, they've finished lower in offense, but all those split cuts, all those ball movement, that is kind of a bitch to guard for those guys. You have to run around screens. That is clearly taking one player on the other team. It's making them more tired on offense. It just is. The other three guys who are guarding the Sixers, other three guys, that seems like a job. I would sign up for that if I was a player. I'd be like, Coach, let me take PJ. Let me take even Tobias, good player. Let me take him. He's not really doing all that much. And you're right. The Chicago action, we know that they run it. When did they run it? They ran it the week that all those guys were out. That's what they did. They get in the corner, and we'll get the ball, we'll throw delay, and then we'll have Montrez, off the Chicago action, and they'll run it. Yeah, it's funny. It's just the delay with Joel and James, it just stops now. It just stops at the top of the key, and then it's an ISO. Yeah, look, man, I agree with you. I think it's generally easier to guard, and I feel like those guys in the week that, or the couple weeks, whatever it was. It was the 1 week when all of those guys were out, but the couple weeks where a bunch of those guys were out, they showed they're not incapable of attacking from the second side, right? They can continue to get the ball. So yeah, that's the other reason why it's just it just got to be more. We're talking about Tobias after last night's game, and by the way, deserves a lot of praise for kind of just
huge
for just taking a smaller role, and he played a role that if you want to win a title, he wasn't good enough to have that role, just to have the ball that much. But he actually has taken this role, and I think Doc is correct to praise him. When you don't touch the ball for 5 minutes, those shots are not that easy. But I think we should revisit why is he not touching the ball for 5 minutes again? Just a little touch here and there. He's pretty damn good. And so I definitely think there just needs to be a little bit more. One more thought on that. I mentioned, they're third in ISOs. Think about how much time Embiid has missed. In terms of frequency. If he and Harden had played the whole year, they'd probably be first by a mile in that. We are watching them isolate more than Brooklyn, more than Dallas. It's pretty wild.
It's funny. You go back to the first year where they have been, and without knowing the numbers, I would assume because they didn't have any kind of shot creators on those teams,
they were low.
It must have been a very low ISO team. And you're I'm begging for just somebody to come in and be a shot creator, just so that way they can have a little bit of ISO to them. And now you're no, I want you to stop that, please. It's making me want to throw up when I watch these games.
I've talked about that with Derek. It's just it's the exact opposite, and now you just want the opposite thing because it's harder to watch. So I don't exactly know what there's probably a middle ground between the two of them.
No, absolutely. Yeah. What would you, if you had to extend Tobias, what would your number be?
Oh man, I mean, see, I'm more of a Tobias guy than most people.
Just
I would say. Yeah, just because I understood the idea of, okay, maybe trade him this summer, break him into two if you can. That never really was realistically on the table. That's much easier to say in practice than because the guys you get back are just not as good as him. And is he a perfect fit? No. Is he a perfect defender? No, he's a weirdly versatile defender, but he also falls asleep off the ball, and he sometimes his rebounding can be an issue. All of those things, dude. You know what? I don't even know. Because with the way the cap is going up, would it be 20-something million, something like that in there. Because again, the cap is going up. 20-something million is not going to be different, or it's not going to be what it is now. But it's a good question, and I certainly have thought over the years, again, his contract is. I think once you get to this trade deadline, his contract is not bad anymore. When you have 1 year left, it's a lot of money, but first off, he's a good player, he's a good teammate, all of those things. And he's only there for 1 more year. So it's not a burdensome deal. So it'll be interesting to see if he does, ultimately get moved. But I would just kind of say he's not a guy at least in the last probably like a year or so. I wouldn't be like looking to move him.
No, he's the type of guy where like he can have his nights where it's like 8 points, 5 assists, five rebounds, whatever. And then you look at the aggregate of what he does, and you're like, I can't think of many guys that you can get in return that are going to actively make your team better. Like today, for example, with the whole Zach LaVine Chicago thing that's happening, people are like, well, would you do Tobias for Zach LaVine? I'm like, in a vacuum, Zach LaVine's a better offensive player because of, what he can do, whatnot. He's also a horrific defender, and Tobias is a better defender than he is. And Tobias is also a forward who fits your needs, and you don't need another guard. Like, that's not a trade that I look at and I'm like, yeah, I do that. Like, no, I think I would decline that trade if I'm the Sixers.
I do too, from like an asset standpoint. Yeah, I think I'd rather have LaVine, although his injuries are also, that's something too. I know Toby's been a little bit banged up here, but like generally an Iron Man over his career. LaVine certainly has dealt with some stuff. Yeah, it's weird to say because like that's something, over the past couple of years, you could never. How many picks would you have to trade attached to Tobias for Zach LaVine? And I think part of that is the contract as well. And now that Zach LaVine has a long extension too, so maybe it's a little bit of the opposite.
Which, by the way, are we sure that Scotty Barnes is still untouchable in trade talks for Kevin Durant? Because
I look
about that one.
They're tough to watch, that team.
That right now. No shot creation whatsoever. It's like you're watching a Sixers team of a couple, like in the last couple of years, but like they kind of are with the times where they're just long and athletic, but they just don't have like the cohesive skills that you need to connect all those pieces together.
Yeah, I like that. Like a better version of like the Iguodala Fat teams that were like, you didn't have somebody in the half court. Although I will say Siakam has been pretty good, but yeah, if he's your best guy, I mean, he's awesome last night. So
yeah,
and he didn't injure anybody either too. So
that's always a good one. Over the last 5 games, this is a trend that I think is very bizarre and concerning, despite them winning 5 in a row. Over the last 5 games, opponents are scoring 132 nearly points per 100 transition plays, which would be the 3rd best transition offense in the league over the course of a season. You would think that the offensive rebounding for the Sixers, those things usually go hand in hand. If you're trying to, really get back in transition, and that means that you're not trying to get to the glass. Sixers also have an offensive rebounding percentage of 19.66, which would be dead last of this season by a substantial margin. That doesn't make a lot of sense because usually you're giving up one of those things for the other, and they're horrific at both. That doesn't. How is that a thing? I think what it comes down to, at least in my eyes, from when I rewatched the games, number one is effort. Like with Harden on the court, you're basically 4 guys getting back at any given transition opportunity because he's not trying. He's just gonna he'll take a one step just to see if maybe I'm feeling it, and you're like, no, I'm not. I'm just gonna stay back here, and you guys can get me when you're ready. And so it's inherently it's difficult 4-on-5, or when you won't have 4 guys getting back and you're already at a disadvantage because it's transition. But they also give up a lot of bad shots. Like they give up a lot of threes in transition, and their rotations and decision making aren't that great. What do you make of the fact that not only is their transition defense terrible, but also their offensive rebounding is terrible?
I think it's effort, man. Like I think you said that. Like it's tough too because I think you know this. Like I don't like to just be like you're not trying hard enough. Like I think that is old sports writer, very easy. Like there are different ways to explain it. In this case, I think it was effort. I mean, you remember the first 5 or 6 games of the year, they were setting like they were almost breaking cleaning the glasses transition metrics for how bad they were. Like it was insane, man. Like it was like, and also too, it was the first 5 games of the year. What is going on? Like I think you can accept this a little bit in late February, early March, like the doldrums of the season when you've already banked 38 wins or something like that. Yeah. And I think it's fair to say that they played too many games in the NBA. There's bad effort. Why is there bad effort when you're starting though? That's not what it is. They have gotten that in check, I would say, over the next 20 or so games. you're right. The last 5 games have been pretty bad, but I would just say, like, when it's bad, it's effort, because when teams play against them, there are times the Sixers eat in transition, but it is a product of the other team just, sending 3 or 4 guys to the rim, where every rebound is like really hard to get. And, to their credit, I feel like in recent games, they've gotten a little better at, pitching the ball out to Tobias, pitching the ball out to Shake, and getting easy stuff. They got easy stuff against Toronto in last night's game. That the bench unit did a really good job getting some easy ones, which is good to see, because it's not really the fastest team in the world. But yes, when that is bad, it's effort. Harden is a terrible defensive player. There's no way around it. I think they could still win a bunch of games. Still think they could be a decent playoff team with it, but he's not good in the half court. And even when he's getting back in transition, like, he's not good at really stopping the ball. Like, he's, everybody knows his main 2 things are, like, he can play post defense and switch because he doesn't have to move doing that, and he's actually a little stronger than he looks.
Yeah.
And his hands are pretty good, but sometimes he fouls people when he does that too. And those are the 2 things. But anything that requires him to move, which transition is certainly one of those things, it's tough. So for them, I think it's just got to be about, like, limiting the possession game. Like, okay, I don't ever see a chance when the Sixers are going to be the team that's running the ball down the other team's throat and they're stopping the transition and they're hitting the glass. But I think we saw it in that Toronto series for the most part last year, where that was a team that was supposed to eat on them in terms of offensive rebounding and transition, that double that you had to say. And I think they were okay at it, and okay enough to allow their talent in the half court and all the other stuff that matters to kind of shine through. But I think it's effort. I think it was the playoffs and they were actually locked in and they were cheating. That's what it was.
Yeah. Whenever a shot goes up, first of all, Joel is typically outside because Joel likes to be outside when the shot goes up, because he's either waiting to screen, wants to catch himself, but he's usually never by the rim. And PJ will try. God will he try, but just not big enough to get these rebounds against these massive guys. And I don't think they have a lot of. I don't think the Sixers as a team are constructed to be a great rebounding team, because, like, they're like Montrez, horrible rebounder. Paul Reed, when he gets in the game, can be a decent rebounder, but, like, you're not going to play him enough to really have that count for you that much.
You're also switching a lot too, so he's farther away from the rim sometimes too, which is tough.
Yeah, and Joel, as big and monstrous as he is, has never been a great rebounder. So, I mean, this team is not a great rebounding team, and I think PJ helps with that a little bit when you bring him in this past offseason. But when the shot goes up, there's nobody near the glass, and so you're thinking, okay, there's nobody near the glass. Then why isn't there anybody getting back either? The first step is in the opposite direction is just not quick enough, and effort. I think that's a sign of coasting through, an 82 game season, trying to limit some of the potential risks at play when you try to go hard. But that is a trend that is not a championship trend. If we're gonna also get killed on the glass, we gotta we gotta get back, but ain't doing that either. So I think it'll even out in the playoffs come, but it's a very bizarre, I guess, counterintuitive item.
I think their trend, their path to success, like what end of that trade-off they're going to win when they're good, like what half are they going to take? It's got to be the transition defense, because I don't really see the rebounding potential. Like, I think PJ. I mean, I think the first 5 games, like when I was, they were cleaning the glass, I think that spooked them, and I think they told Tobias and George and those guys, like, get back, like, just get, you're not, and they're probably not doing a great job of it over the past 5 games, but they have done a better job of it
for sure.
Since the beginning of the year. But I think that's the thing they have to take away, because they don't have great rebounders. I mean, like you said it, like Joel is he's kind of a bad rebounder on both ends of the court. Like, I just think his, especially like on the defensive glass too, like he gets them because he's big, obviously, but there are times where he just doesn't really box out. And you know what? Like, I will say, like, people compliment like Brook Lopez and his boxing out. Brook Lopez doesn't have to do what Joel Embiid has to do. So I understand it a little bit, but it is part of your story and kind of how you have to construct this team.
I also think, like, you look at the Houston game, and when you're getting beat off the dribble so much like they were in that game, you're forcing him to still lift up just a little bit. Like, even if it's just like a step, he has to lift just to stop the ball.
Yeah.
And when the shot goes up, he can't just, he's trying to contest. You need your teammates to crash a little bit and block out. And they don't do that either. So when you get somebody getting a putback dunk on your head, that's as much a reflection on his teammates as it is him, even though he gets the discredit for that, if you will. So I think, but I do think that he can, when he knows it's important, he will be the one to get to the glass. He when he knows it matters, he will apply himself as a rebounder. One thing I wanted to, I think is very interesting. They are using the 3-guard lineup a little more. And Doc said the other night, like, this was more out of necessity because of the people they don't have. I don't want that to be the case. I think the Harden, Melton, Milton trio is actually a very interesting trio. And you apply that even further to Tyrese. According to, and I think it was, this is Clean the Glass, they're plus 13.8 per 100 possessions and 43 possessions with James, Shake, and DeAnthony. They're plus 5 overall in 27 minutes, and their effective field goal is 61. Opponents are 46. So they're limited sample size for sure. But there are some signs that it's working on both sides of the court. I don't know that you can do that and go small that way in the playoffs, because you look at the landscape of the East. Boston took a step back defensively. It's like, I think maybe you could even just try that, but against Milwaukee, if you're facing them, I don't think you can go that small against Milwaukee. Brooklyn might be able to do it because they don't have any rebounding. Maybe you can win that battle, but I don't know that there's like a meaningful playoff series against an opponent where you can say, let's try to deploy this 3-guard lineup and, maybe move PJ to the 5, or, let Thybulle play the 4. I want to see them experiment with that a little bit when Tyrese gets back, because of the dynamic of speed that he adds to the equation. What do you think of the 3-guard lineups?
Yeah, I'd like to see more of it. I mean, I am all for experimentation. Like, as much as I'm saying, like, these wins aren't that impressive, like, or whatever, like, that's fine. They're doing what I expect them to do, those type of things. Like, try some stuff. And I think the 3-guard lineup is, as much crap as Doc takes, and I think some of it is fair for sure. I feel like they've experimented in some ways this year, not with the offense, like we said, that's a little too ISO centric, but like they play zone a lot, which I don't really like, but it shows me they're trying shit, so that's like, I think that's cool. I think the 3-guard lineups are, something. When I looked at the rotation coming into the year, I was like, I don't know if you want to do that. You feel like you're okay at wing, but with House and Thybulle, it's like, I'm not sure those guys should be preventing you from at least trying it. And I would say the key component in there of the 3-guard lineup, and a guy who's been better than I thought, and I thought he was going to be pretty good, is DeAnthony Melton.
He's awesome. Oh.
Yeah, he's fun. He's a fun dude to watch. And like we were just talking about the rebounding, he's the one dude who, like, when they play Houston and they have, Houston's got all these wing athletes like just crashing the glass like crazy, and Joel's basically under siege. And you're right, it's not completely his fault that he's under siege. DeAnthony Melton's like the one guy on the Sixers who can jump with those guys.
Yeah,
and he has, like, it's very clear, like, his steal numbers, his block numbers, his rebounding numbers, everything athletic wise, like, Mr. Do Something is a fair nickname for him. He's good. And, and he's a willing shooter too. Sometimes he has bad offensive nights. That's okay. I'm not too worried about that. So he's been impressive. And I think, having him play kind of the 3, he's not big enough to guard, like, Kevin Durant or like the normal 3s or whatever, but not a lot of people are. So I would like to experiment more with it. I wonder if, I think you mentioned, what is it? It's Milton, Harden has been pretty good, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I got that in front of me right now. Yeah. That's been good. And then Melton, Harden, Maxey has also been good. Yeah. Although that's done a lot less. So I think he's kind of the critical piece, because even with Shake in there, like, Shake's okay, I guess, defensively. Like, I wouldn't call him like amazing, but he's definitely better than Harden and Maxey are. You're not like a great defensive backcourt there, and I think you're going to have to win with offense. I guess, like, it to me, it's kind of interesting, and like, who are the 2 big men that you play with those groups? Because I kind of think they should be Joel lineups almost, just because like the lack of size. I mean, look, I can make fun of Joel's rebounding all he wants. Like they're like 9 points better defensively when he plays, and that's like for a very obvious reason. Like he's big and he's smart, and even when he's being a little, little bit of conserving energy, he can clean up stuff. So that would be something. Like it's funny, Doc mentioned like playing that group with Thybulle, and I don't know, I'm not sure about that. I mean, again, that would add more defense, but maybe that's the team you go with. Maybe you play Thybulle and you try and get him and Melton to be running around. I know when they've played, they have not been very good, but they have forced a crap ton of turnovers, which makes sense. Maybe you try and match them up with your 3 great offensive players and see like how that works. I'd love to see more of it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, listen, when it gets to guts of the playoffs, if you get to where you want to go, that lineup is not the foundation of that lineup is probably not going to get too many stops. You're trying to steal a couple minutes here and there with going small and just kind of daring your opponent to be like, let's see if you can go this small and stay in front of us. And are you going to switch this? Really? Do you want to have Al Horford out, guarding Tyrese Maxey on the perimeter? Like even if it's not necessarily to your success, you just kind of want to dare your opponent to try to keep up with you, which I don't know that you can keep up with that kind of a 3-man unit. And to your point about D'Anthony, like I think that lineup can win a possession on defense here and there, just because he's coming from the weak side and he's blocking off the rim. He's swooping in from nowhere and just volleyball spiking it off the glass, and then you're out and running.
I mean, yeah, if you play with that lineup I just suggested with Embiid and Harden, like Embiid and Harden can chill in the backcourt while Harden throws a hit-ahead pass to the other. Those are what? Those are your 3 fastest players on your team. You're actually like a pretty fast group getting up and down the court if those are your 3 guys. Now, can you make it work? Thybulle, obviously, in any sort of half-court game is the same issue he's always been. But yeah, it's like, yeah, I want to see it. I still think when I look at this team and some of the guys have been up and down, House has been, hurt and he wasn't very good to start the year. Like, I still think they have more tools to work with in past years. And I guess that could be one reason for optimism that like, and like last year's team, it's like, Korkmaz has to play. Like, he's like, you're not in. Thybulle has to play. Like, it's not like, well, Doc is taking him out. Well, he's putting him in for Korkmaz. Like, I feel like there are more NBA rotation players in this group that can kind of do winning things when it, House can guard bigger guys, those type of things. So yeah, I would like to see them experiment with it more. But in fairness to them, like they've been super banged up, so they haven't really had all those options available. They've experimented with some of them because they've had to, but not all of them.
You actually just gave me a good segue to the last thing I wanted to cover with you. I don't know. With Thybulle, I'm not seeing it anymore. Like the way that I did the first couple of years. Like the offense is one thing. Like I get it. He's not a great offensive player. He never will be. It's whatever. I need you then to be a superior, top of the line, all world defensive player. And yet here I am watching him. He gets stuck on the back hip a lot, and he fouls guys from behind. He fouls them from the side. He gets beat to the basket a ton. He gambles and gets beat for his gambles result in guys getting open shots. I don't get it, anymore. And like I think Doc has done a decent job situationally with him this season, but I just don't see a world where you can play him big minutes when games matter, and that makes me. And like on the other hand. Has Daniel House been great? No, he's what you get when you pay $3 million for a guy for the biannual exception. But it's a little bit better offensively because he can make shots and like with some level of consistency. He also isn't afraid to dribble the ball and like put a little bit of pressure on the rim. I think defensively he can be a little bit of a scatterbrain sometimes, but I find myself trusting him more than I trust Matisse.
Totally. And that's probably right. That's like, that would be the 4 in that lineup. It would be House because like, I still like talking about Thybulle, but I mean, like, he's still the same player he's always been. And the same player is a guy who teams are just not going to guard in the playoffs. And House, you're right. He's not afraid to dribble. In fact, he loves doing it because every catch and shoot shot he takes turns into a one step back, which is very funny because you know what? And he's starting to make a decent amount of them. So I'm not even mad at him. It's kind of a funny idiosyncratic thing for him. I definitely think he is the safer bet, probably more long term. He weirdly is like when you get him in transition, like that dude is like he's trying to tear somebody's head off on these dunks.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
And he tries like some pretty hard stuff. Like it's so I do get a kick out of that. Completely agree. Like his defense, I wonder if it's a matter of like he played in Houston for such a long time with Harden where they switched. And it's like in some ways that's when you switch 1 to 5, you don't have to make the you don't have to trap the box on the weak side. You don't have to, tag the roll man, do those things and X out, all of these off ball things. And maybe that's going to take some getting used to. I mean, also like he needs to like not cut his foot on whatever he did this week. That was kind of like a weird explanation he gave there.
That was a weird explanation.
didn't really. He was like, I think somebody was like, "Were you in your home? What happened?" He was like, "No."
Yeah. I was like, "Did you step on a Lego?" And he's like, "No." I was like, "Okay, whatever you say."
Yeah. So yeah, definitely some scatterbrain tendencies. I agree with you. Like I think he is the safer bet because like as much as I like Matisse as a person, as much as I enjoy him when the chaos he's creating it, all of those things, it just fundamentally comes down to the same thing. And a similar thing to Ben Simmons. If you're not being guarded, it just doesn't matter really. It doesn't matter all that much. And I hate that basketball is centered that way, that's the issue. But until they change the rules, that's what's going to be. And PJ Tucker has been like, getting laps for a long time. I think when push comes to shove, he's going to get guarded in the playoffs because people are going to be afraid of him taking this
40% 3-point shooter. Yeah. And I think Matisse has gotten like a little bit like this touch bit better from deep in recent games. The thing that I was like, it's like he just hasn't learned was the Laker game again when he fouls Austin Reeves. Like you had one job, just one simple job. Don't foul a 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
Make a contest.
He can't.
And he just goes and runs right into him and commits a 3-shot foul. And you would think that and I get it, like the heat of the moment, you're trying to go in there and do your best job that you can, but you got to learn from when you do it again in the playoffs against the Hawks in Game 7, and you foul a 3-point shooter on a critical possession of the game. And that was kind of when I was like, look, he hasn't gotten better offensively in 4 years. He still makes a lot of the same mistakes defensively. What are we doing here? Why should I trust this guy to be a contributor in the playoffs? And I couldn't come up with a reason on either end.
Yeah, no, that specific play, like it got lost because they won the game and because Harden was throwing the ball all over the gym and PJ and Melton made some really bad mistakes in that game. That is a play like you just can't make. Like that's just like and a lot of people want him as a defensive sub late in games. And I think you can point to that because, like you said, it happened in the Hawks game famously. It happens a decent amount where he fouls these guys. And it's like, you can't have that. Like, that is a play you can't make. The Sixers are not asking for you to block the shot. Like, you need to just defend without fouling as best as possible. So that is an issue. I completely agree with you, too, like, in terms of, like, one-on-one defense, like, you can get by them, like you can get them on your hip, you can get them to jump after that happens. The fundamental elements of defense. I wonder if some of that is just like the league has kind of caught up to them and kind of scouted them a little bit better. I wonder if some of it too. I said this to Derek on our last pod. I wonder if some of it is that he doesn't get to play with Ben Simmons anymore. Where I think if you had the two of those guys playing together, there were times that they just like were so crazy together and they were so fast and they covered so much ground that actually became like a defense unto itself. I'm not saying that was going to work in the playoffs, but to get you through the regular season, I think that was a card the Sixers could play that other teams really couldn't. And he was a big part about that. I do want to say one thing in Matisse's favor. They've been awesome when he has played this year. Randomly.
Correct.
I haven't dug into the numbers of why that has happened because I agree with you. Like he looks like a similar player. I'm seeing the same mistakes, but he's like their second. I think it's like him and Joel are like the top two guys in terms of it. So maybe it's just one of those weird years. Like I'm not freaking out about it or anything like that, but just I guess worth noting.
And people have brought that up to me. Like that's like a common refrain in the, in when I have conversations about Matisse. It's like the advanced numbers say this, and I'm like, I dig in the numbers all the time. I'm a big pro numbers guy. That's a scenario where like, okay, numbers say this. You're also looking at net rating where it's largely dependent upon the four other guys on the court. And plus minus similar thing, unless you're comparing exactly what happens when Joel leaves the court and Montrezl Harrell comes on the court. It's hard to grasp that individual player's
worse stuff happens in that.
Yeah. How much of it is those lineups are great because of his insertion versus they're great despite him being there. And I just like the simple thing you ask him to do, just to, like, we need you to apply pressure to the ball and make a guy's life a little bit harder as he shoots a game tying three. And that hands back, just hands back, keep your hands back. Don't jump into him, just jump straight up and put pressure on him. Now I'm just gonna whack him in the back of the head. I'm just gonna hit him. I'm gonna go right into his legs, and I'm gonna be surprised when they call the foul. I can't trust it, and I'm happy that I'm not the crazy one because you agreed with me there.
Some of it, sometimes you just gotta watch a game. Sometimes you just gotta watch it and say, yeah, I don't believe it for this reason because of the plays he's making in front of me.
Yeah. Last question I have for you. It's December 20th. Trade deadline is in February. You look at this team, and I was high on their backup 5 standing, coming into the year. I'm not as worried about it as I have been in previous years, but I'm not convinced anymore either. You look at what this team needs with the limited assets they have. Backup 5 or more wing depth for you, or is it something else?
I always tend to go with more wing depth on these things. Like as much as I like chronicling the era of backup 5 disasters that this team has had, I always call it the nerdy reference, but the defense against the dark arts position from Harry Potter. It just changes every year, and it's always something bad is going to happen. I still think between B-Ball Paul and PJ, like they'll be okay. Like I think one of those guys will figure it out. So I always default more towards wing depth. But I agree with you. Like I thought they were kind of going to roll teams in the backup minutes, in part because of the backup 5s. I thought Reed was going to take a step forward, and he just hasn't been quite as good. Like he just has not been. I don't think he's a bad player by any means, and I think some of it has to do with like Harden has not played great in the minutes they've played together. Like it's like you said, like you can't just put the net rating all on one person. That said, I don't think he's been like as much of a positive force as you would want him to be. Trez has been, his net rating has been better, but when I watch him and the numbers bear this out, he's not the finisher he used to be. He's not even close. Yeah.
It's really bad. I think at one point he was like at, I want to say 50% at the rim, which
I think it's only still like 53. Yeah.
God. And I think for his career, he was at like, I looked at this a couple weeks ago, so I don't know what I don't remember exactly. It was something like 70 was around where he had been. And then, which is awesome. Like I'll take 70% all day long. And then you had this monstrous fall off. And by the way, he's never, ever been a capable defender. And he is statistically maybe one of the 5 worst rebounding bigs in the NBA. So you don't know what you're getting from him on a night-to-night basis. He's been a little better lately. That quick hook shot always gets me. I don't ever know what's going to happen with that thing. He kind of throws it over the shoulder with like one little short hook, and you're like, oh, let's see how that goes. But yeah, he loses the ball all the time under the basket. He gets rim blocked. He gets layup blocked. What happened? Is this another instance of guy comes to Sixers, guy can no longer do job? Like
yeah. I think he just aged probably quicker than most people. He's only like 28, but you mentioned him losing the ball into the rim. Like prime Trez was, again, he never was a good playoff player because of his defense, but prime Trez in the regular season, like he would get one of those offensive rebounds under the rim, and there'd be like 3 guys around him, and his strength would allow him, and his leaping ability, and like just like his toughness on those plays would allow him to kind of burrow through those guys and get a layup up off the rim and make it. That's just not there anymore. Like there was a couple plays in that Kings game last week, which they won. The thing about this, like they scored 80 points in the first half, and they could have scored probably 160 if they kept trying the entire game. There were like 3 or 4 plays where Harden hit him on the pick and roll. They were playing conventional, and he gave him the little lefty pocket pass we always see. Like he's like wide open. He like blew a tire 3 times. Like these are easy ones, man. This is not that hard. Like I think Reed finishes those ones. So that's I think Trez playing in the regular season is for a little while is fine, like whatever. I do think like in terms of him and Reed, they're even with the lack of athleticism, the way he runs like delay and stuff like that is way better. He's way better at it. Like he's just much more decisive, better passer, all those things. But he is the one guy of the 3, even though all 3 have been somewhat disappointing. Reed, the Tucker alignment, and Trez, he is the one that I'm confident. Like I don't think that's working in the playoffs. So.
No, there's no way. And I wonder if we'll get the similar like I'm going to play DeAndre Jordan whether you want me to or not, and then only to 3 days later, okay, we're going to forget he existed. I think my favorite quality of Trez is he'll get fouled and like not even an M1, he'll get fouled, and then he goes into our corner of the court and just bellows like he's King Kong, and like, all right, you just go to the free throw line and make these 2, and then you bellow at us. But until then,
I kind of like that, man. He like flexes, he's like a professional wrestler.
He gets excited by everything. It's fantastic.
He's he does make me laugh with his enthusiasm that he plays with. It just make a few more laps, That's all.
Yeah, exactly. Rich Hofmann, your work is outstanding over at The Athletic. Anything you want to plug real quickly?
No, just The Athletic, Sixers Beat, those 2 things. That's all.
All right, man. Well, I will see you tomorrow against Detroit. No Cade Cunningham. I'm sure it'll be a wire-to-wire nail biter like it always is.
Yeah, sure, man. See you, Austin.
See you, buddy.